In every season of life, there comes a moment when the noise around you becomes too loud to ignore, when the demands, expectations, and comparisons begin to press on your spirit in ways that feel heavier than before, and when the world tries to pull your attention in 1,000 different directions all at once. As you step into 2026, the call to return inward becomes not only important but essential, because the truth is simple: nothing around you can find clarity unless the space within you becomes clear first. Focusing on yourself isn't selfish, it's a necessary act of preservation, an act of realignment, an act of remembering who you are beneath all the layers of pressure and distraction that life has placed on you over the years. When you protect your inner world, you protect the foundation from which every decision, every relationship, every dream, and every act of service flows. And if that foundation is unstable, everything you build upon it will shake, collapse, or drift away with the next storm. To focus on yourself in 2026 is to understand that the heart is the first home you are responsible for tending. A home cannot be filled with peace if it is stacked with unresolved emotions, unrealistic expectations, and the weight of trying to be everything for everyone while slowly disappearing within your own life. Many people live in a state of emotional burnout without recognizing it, because society has taught them to keep producing, keep showing up, keep smiling, keep pretending, and keep ignoring themselves for the sake of approval or belonging. But the soul does not forget. The heart does not stay quiet forever. Ignoring your inner needs is like planting seeds in dry soil and expecting a garden to grow. In 2026, the world around you may demand more from you, but it is your responsibility to decide which demands are worthy of your energy and which ones are costing you your peace. Focusing on yourself requires the courage to disconnect from the noise long enough to hear your own voice again. Not the voice shaped by fear, comparison, or past wounds, but the one buried beneath all of that. The voice that whispers instead of shouts, that calls instead of demands, that guides instead of pressures. Too many people live disconnected from their own souls because they've been taught to measure their worth through external markers, success, validation, relationships, material gain, or the opinions of others. But the truth is that none of these things can give you a stable sense of identity. They can decorate your life, but they cannot define it. Real self-focus begins with returning to the core of who you are without attaching your worth to anything outside of yourself. As you move into 2026, one of the greatest acts of self-focus will be learning to protect your emotional boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are gates that allow you to choose what enters your life and what must be turned away. Without boundaries, the world will walk into your heart with muddy shoes and leave footprints that stain your peace. You cannot allow everyone access to your inner space. Not everyone deserves your emotional energy, your time, or your vulnerability. You are not obligated to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You are not required to shrink yourself to make others more comfortable. The moment you begin focusing on yourself, you will notice that some people become uncomfortable, not because you are doing something wrong, but because they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries. Protecting your inner world means learning to say no, learning to walk away, learning to choose peace over chaos, and learning that your well-being is not up for negotiation. The year ahead will offer new opportunities, but opportunities have no meaning if your inner state is too overwhelmed to recognize them. Focusing on yourself means taking time to heal from the wounds you have ignored for too long. It means acknowledging the parts of you that still ache, the memories that still hurt, the fears that still linger, and the habits that still hold you back. Healing is not a luxury, it is a responsibility. You cannot pour from a cup that remains cracked. Many people fear the process of healing because it requires stillness, honesty, and vulnerability, but avoiding healing only prolongs the pain. In 2026, make space for your emotional restoration. Sit with your feelings instead of running from them. Allow yourself to cry when you need to. Allow yourself to rest when you are tired. Allow yourself to release what no longer serves you, even if letting go feels uncomfortable at first. The discomfort of growth is far better than the comfort of staying broken. Part of focusing on yourself is recognizing that solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is a sacred space where clarity is born. It is where you can hear the whispers you've drowned out with noise, where you can reconnect with your purpose, where your intuition becomes louder than the demands of the world. Too many people fear being alone because they do not know themselves outside of the roles they play. But you are more than your responsibilities, more than your titles, more than your past, more than who others expect you to be. When you spend time alone, you discover the parts of yourself that have been neglected. You strengthen the relationship you have with your soul. And when that relationship becomes strong, no amount of external chaos can easily shake you. In focusing on yourself, you must also examine the environments that shape you. Your surroundings influence your emotions, thoughts, habits, and even your sense of identity. If you are constantly surrounded by negativity, criticism, competition, or comparison, you will begin to internalize those energies. Protecting your inner world means choosing environments that nourish your character rather than poison it. It means being intentional about what you consume, social media, conversations, entertainment, habits, and understanding how each of these things affects your inner state. You cannot expect inner peace while feeding your mind with chaos. You cannot expect clarity while immersing yourself in distraction. You cannot expect self-love while surrounding yourself with people who do not respect you. 2026 is the year to choose environments that help you rise rather than ones that pull you downward. Another part of focusing on yourself is recognizing the importance of forgiveness, both forgiving others and forgiving yourself. Holding on to resentment is like holding on to fire and expecting someone else to burn. It is your heart that suffers, your peace that cracks, your energy that drains. Forgiveness does not mean that what happened was acceptable, nor does it mean you must return to the person or situation. Forgiveness is an act of cleansing your inner space, removing the weight that keeps your heart heavy and allowing yourself to move forward without carrying the emotional burdens of the past. And while forgiving others is difficult, forgiving yourself is often even harder. Many people live in a state of internal conflict, replaying past mistakes, criticizing themselves for what they should have done differently, and punishing themselves for choices they made while they were still learning. But self-focus requires self-compassion. You cannot grow while holding yourself hostage to yesterday's version of you. In 2026, focusing on yourself also means understanding the power of your mental environment. Your thoughts shape your emotions, and your emotions shape your actions. If your mind is filled with doubt, fear, and negativity, your life will reflect those inner storms. Protecting your inner world requires becoming intentional about your internal dialogue. Speak to yourself with kindness. Replace self-criticism with self-awareness. Replace fear with trust. Replace comparison with appreciation. You deserve to be spoken to gently, especially by your own mind. You deserve to give yourself the same compassion you freely offer to others. Your thoughts are seeds. Choose carefully what you plant, because your life will grow from those seeds, whether you are aware of it or not. Focusing on yourself means understanding when to step back from people, situations, or habits that drain you. Energy is not infinite, it must be protected. You cannot bloom in environments that consistently take more than they give. You cannot rise while surrounded by people who clip your wings. You cannot evolve while staying loyal to situations that keep you stagnant. In 2026, give yourself permission to distance your heart from anything that disrupts your peace. You are not abandoning anyone, you are choosing yourself. And choosing yourself is the first step to becoming strong enough to choose your purpose, your growth, and your future. To focus on yourself is also to embrace the journey of becoming. You are not meant to remain who you were last year, 5 years ago, or even yesterday. Change is an expression of life, and resisting change only leads to inner conflict. The version of you that 2026 requires is not found in clinging to old habits or outdated identities. It is found in allowing yourself to evolve, in accepting that growth often feels uncomfortable, and in trusting that every stage of transformation is preparing you for what you are meant to become. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are simply unfolding in your own time, and focusing on yourself allows you to honor that unfolding with patience and compassion. And as you journey deeper into yourself, you begin to discover that the strength you were searching for outside was always within you, waiting to be awakened. You begin to realize that peace is not something you chase, it is something you create. You begin to understand that the world around you mirrors the world within you. And when your inner world is tended with care, everything else begins to fall into place with a clarity that once seemed impossible. Your growth in 2026 depends on what you choose to walk away from, because sometimes the most powerful step forward is actually a step away from what drains you, what confuses you, what belittles you, what distracts you, and what slowly chips away at your sense of self. Growth is not only about addition, it is deeply connected to subtraction. You cannot become who you are meant to be if you keep holding on to versions of yourself that no longer fit the person you are becoming. You cannot rise if you continue to carry weights that were never meant for your journey ahead. You cannot seek clarity while clinging to things that blur your vision. And yet walking away is one of the hardest decisions a human heart ever makes, because it requires you to let go of familiarity, comfort, and attachments that have woven themselves into your identity over time. But if you want 2026 to be different from every year before it, you must be willing to walk away from what is no longer aligned with your purpose. There are moments in life when staying becomes more painful than leaving, when the cost of holding on becomes higher than the fear of letting go, when you realize that loyalty to the wrong things can be a form of self-betrayal. People often stay in places, relationships, habits, and environments that slowly suffocate their inner world simply because walking away feels uncertain, unfamiliar, or frightening. But nothing grows in the shadows of fear. Growth requires courage, and courage often looks like letting go. When you choose to walk away from something that is harming your peace, draining your spirit, or limiting your potential, you are not losing, you are making space. Space for clarity, space for healing, space for better, space for the person you are becoming. In 2026, your growth will depend heavily on your willingness to release the things that have kept you small. And sometimes, the things that hold you back are not obvious enemies, but quiet patterns. The habit of doubting yourself, the belief that you are unworthy of change, the fear of disappointing others, the tendency to shrink so that others can feel comfortable. The constant attempt to explain yourself to people who have no interest in understanding you, the inner voice that tells you to settle instead of strive. These patterns feel familiar, even safe, because you have carried them for years. But familiar does not mean beneficial. Safe does not mean healthy. Comfort does not mean aligned. If you want to evolve, you must be willing to walk away from the inner scripts that tell you your growth is too much, your dreams are too big, or your feelings are too inconvenient. Walking away is not always physical. Sometimes it is emotional, mental, and spiritual. It means disentangling yourself from expectations that no longer fit your journey. It means removing yourself from cycles that drain your energy. It means stepping out of stories that were written for you by other people, but no longer reflect your truth. It means giving yourself permission to rewrite the narratives you were handed. Too many people live according to stories that suffocate their authentic selves. Stories of unworthiness, stories of fear, stories of survival that were meant only for a season but became permanent identities. To walk away from these narratives is to reclaim your power. It is to say, I am more than what happened to me. I am more than what they said about me. I am more than who I was forced to become while trying to survive. This reclamation is the foundation of deep and lasting growth. In 2026, you will be asked to walk away from people who do not honor your boundaries, who take without giving, who drain without replenishing, who minimize your emotions, or who attach themselves to you out of convenience rather than connection. Not everyone is meant to continue with you into every chapter of your life. Some people come as lessons, not lifetimes. Some enter your world temporarily to awaken something within you, to reveal a truth, to teach a value, or to expose a weakness. Once their purpose is fulfilled, you must be willing to let them go. Holding on to them not only delays your journey, but also creates emotional conflict that steals your peace. You can love someone and still walk away from them. You can care deeply and still choose distance. You can cherish memories and still recognize that the future requires separation. Walking away is not an act of abandonment. It is an act of alignment. Growth requires you to walk away from environments that no longer nourish your soul. You cannot grow in places that celebrate your silence but fear your voice. You cannot thrive in environments built on comparison, competition, or manipulation. You cannot rise in atmospheres that feed negativity, gossip, or resentment. Your environment shapes your energy, and your energy shapes your life. If your surroundings drain you, you will find yourself shrinking even when your soul is calling you to expand. In silence, solitude, and self-reflection will become your greatest teachers in 2026, because there are truths you will only discover when the world grows quiet, when the noise fades, and when you finally sit with your own soul long enough to hear what it has been trying to tell you for years. In a world that constantly demands your attention, your reaction, your movement, your productivity, and your presence, choosing silence becomes an act of rebellion. Choosing solitude becomes an act of courage. Choosing reflection becomes an act of awakening. You cannot understand yourself until you meet yourself, and you cannot meet yourself until you enter the spaces where distractions can no longer drown out the whispering voice within you. Every time you slow down, every time you disconnect from the external noise, every time you choose stillness over chaos, you open a door to a deeper kind of knowing, a knowing that cannot be taught by people, books, lectures, or experiences alone, but by your own heart. In 2026, life will ask you to cultivate an inner stillness that can hold you steady even when everything around you is shifting. The world is loud, constantly vibrating with opinions, expectations, comparisons, fears, and illusions of perfection. You are surrounded by endless streams of information, distractions that fracture your focus, and pressures that make you believe your worth is tied to constant visibility, noise, and movement. Silence breaks that illusion. When you step into silence, you step away from the identities you perform for others. You step away from the pressure to always respond, always explain, always defend, always entertain. Silence becomes a sanctuary where your soul can breathe without being watched, judged, or measured. In silence, you can finally hear the emotions you have suppressed, the fears you refuse to face, the dreams you have buried, and the truths you have ignored. Silence reveals what noise conceals. Solitude, too, becomes essential for your growth. There is a profound difference between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness is the absence of connection, but solitude is the presence of yourself. Solitude is where you rediscover the parts of you that have been neglected or overshadowed by the roles you play in the lives of others. In solitude, you meet the child inside you who still longs for gentleness. You meet the dreamer within you who still believes in possibilities. You meet the healer inside you who is trying to mend wounds you pretend no longer exist. You meet the warrior within you who has carried you through storms you thought would break you. Solitude allows you to see yourself without the distortion of external opinions. It gives you the space to understand your desires, your boundaries, your wounds, your beliefs, and your calling. Without solitude, growth becomes shallow because you cannot evolve while constantly losing yourself in the noise of other people. Self-reflection becomes the bridge between silence and transformation. When you reflect, you confront the truth of who you are, your patterns, your strengths, your weaknesses, your motivations, and your shadows. Reflection allows you to examine your reactions, your habits, your fears, and your attachments with honesty and compassion. Too often, people move through life on autopilot, repeating the same mistakes, staying stuck in the same cycles, blaming the world for patterns rooted within themselves. Reflection disrupts these cycles. It allows you to see why you overgive, why you overthink, why you attract certain relationships, why you fear certain things, why you keep returning to situations that hurt you. Through reflection, you learn what needs healing, what needs releasing, and what needs embracing. Growth without reflection is temporary. Growth with reflection becomes foundational. In 2026, silence, solitude, and reflection will guide you in ways that noise never could. When you allow yourself to slow down, you notice the imbalances in your life that you once ignored because you were too busy to acknowledge them. You notice the relationships that drain you and the ones that nourish you. You notice the habits that weaken you and the ones that strengthen you. You notice the dreams that ignite your passion and the ones that were never truly yours. You notice the emotions you've been avoiding because feeling them requires vulnerability. You notice the wounds that still linger beneath your surface. You notice the parts of yourself that you have outgrown but continue to carry out of habit. Silence teaches you patience, because in silence you cannot force answers to appear before their time. Solitude teaches you independence, because in solitude you learn that your wholeness does not depend on anyone else's presence. Reflection teaches you wisdom, because through reflection you understand the lessons behind your pain, your failures, your disappointments, and your victories. Together, these three forces become your internal compass, guiding you toward a life that is intentional rather than reactive, peaceful rather than chaotic, aligned rather than scattered. Silence softens your heart in ways you won't expect. When you stop talking, defending, proving, and explaining, you begin to listen to your inner voice, to your intuition, to your emotional truth. You begin to hear the questions that shape your growth. What am I holding on to that hurts me? What am I afraid to admit? What do I want to change? What do I need to forgive? What am I avoiding by staying busy? Silence forces you to confront the things you run from, not to punish you, but to free you. It uncovers the fears buried beneath noise. It exposes the desires you are too scared to pursue. It brings to light the dreams you whispered only in moments of vulnerability. Silence becomes a mirror that shows you everything you have been hiding, even from yourself. Solitude strengthens your relationship with yourself. When you spend time alone, you learn how to soothe your own heart, how to comfort your own fears, how to validate your own emotions, and how to trust your own judgment. You learn that peace is not found in people, but within yourself. You learn that love begins with the relationship you build with your own soul. You learn that happiness cannot be outsourced to external sources. Solitude teaches you emotional independence, not because you do not need others, but because you no longer rely on them to fill the emptiness created by your own neglect. In solitude, you learn to enjoy your own company. You learn to appreciate your own thoughts. You learn to respect your own boundaries. You learn to understand the language of your own heart. Solitude gives you back to yourself. Self-reflection deepens your awareness. Through reflection, you learn to trace the roots of your pain rather than only treating the symptoms. You recognize the childhood wounds that influence your adult decisions. You understand the insecurities that shape your relationships. You uncover the reasons behind your fears. You identify the emotional triggers that cause you to react instead of respond. Reflection becomes a form of emotional archaeology, digging through layers of your inner world to understand the foundations beneath your struggles. When you understand yourself deeply, you gain the power to transform your life from the inside out. You stop blaming others for your pain and start addressing the roots within yourself. You stop repeating patterns and start breaking them with intention. You stop settling for less because you recognize your worth through clarity rather than through comparison. In 2026, the world may continue to move faster, becoming noisier, more demanding, and more overwhelming. But your growth will depend on your ability to move slower, to withdraw when needed, to create pockets of stillness amid chaos. Silence will become your shelter. Solitude will become your anchor. Reflection will become your compass. These inner tools will guide you toward deeper intuition, clearer decision-making, and emotional resilience. When you develop inner stillness, external storms lose their power to shake you. When you develop inner clarity, external confusion cannot misguide you. When you develop inner wisdom, external opinions cannot manipulate you. These internal strengths cannot be bought, borrowed, or inherited. They must be developed through intentional self-connection. The more you allow silence into your life, the more you begin to notice the subtle ways the world tries to influence your thoughts, your emotions, and your identity. Noise convinces you that you must rush, achieve, impress, and perform to be worthy. Silence reminds you that your worth is inherent. Noise pushes you toward people-pleasing and perfectionism. Silence reminds you that authenticity matters more than approval. Noise tells you that you are behind, not enough, or incomplete. Silence reminds you that growth is not a race and that becoming yourself is a lifelong journey. In silence, you reclaim your narrative from the world's expectations. The more you embrace solitude, the more you learn to differentiate between genuine connection and emotional dependency. Solitude helps you recognize who enriches your life and who merely occupies space. It helps you identify which relationships are aligned and which ones are draining. It allows you to enter relationships not from a place of emptiness, but from fullness, strength, and clarity. When you love yourself fully, you stop accepting half love from others. When you enjoy your own company, you stop tolerating relationships that make you feel alone even when you are together. Solitude strengthens your boundaries, your self-worth, and your emotional maturity in ways that cannot be learned in crowds. The more you practice reflection, the more intentional your life becomes. You stop rushing through days without meaning. You stop making decisions from impulse or insecurity. You stop being controlled by your emotions. Reflection helps you pause, analyze, and understand before reacting. It helps you notice patterns that sabotage your happiness. It helps you break cycles you once believed were unchangeable. It helps you grow in directions that are aligned with your deeper purpose. Reflection is what turns experience into wisdom and pain into growth. Without reflection, life repeats. With reflection, life evolves. In 2026, these three teachers, silence, solitude, and reflection, will guide you through transitions you may have avoided in the past. They will lead you toward healing that you once postponed. They will push you to confront truths that you once silenced. They will give you the clarity to walk away from what no longer serves you. They will help you recognize your emotional needs with honesty and compassion. They will reveal the people who are aligned with your heart and the ones who are aligned only with their convenience. They will help you understand which dreams belong to you and which ones were forced onto you. They will help you recognize the spaces where you shrink and the spaces where you expand. These insights cannot be found in noise, only in stillness. Silence teaches you to listen not just to your thoughts, but to the spaces between them. In those spaces, you find intuition. In those spaces, you find alignment. In those spaces, you find truths that cannot be spoken, but only felt. Silence sharpens your awareness of the subtle signals within your heart. Signals that tell you when something is wrong, when something is right, when it is time to stay, and when it is time to leave. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to understand your emotions without being overwhelmed by them. You begin to see life with clarity rather than through the fog of noise. Solitude teaches you what it means to be whole. Many people seek relationships, friendships, and environments not out of love or purpose, but out of fear of being alone. Solitude dissolves that fear. It teaches you that you are not alone when you are with yourself. It teaches you that you can enjoy your own presence, your own thoughts, your own silence. It teaches you that your value is not dependent on who chooses to stay in your life. Solitude helps you build a foundation so strong that even when people leave, you remain whole, grounded, and at peace. Reflection teaches you responsibility, not in a burdensome way, but in an empowering one. It teaches you that your life is shaped by the choices you make, the boundaries you set, the habits you practice, and the beliefs you hold.